This is where the law stops, and I start, sucker. I'm Liam, this is Rob, and welcome to Hey Guys Podcast. This week we look back at a movie with one of the coolest looking characters of the 80s, with one of the best posters of the 80s, and I mean, that might be about it, mightn't it? Sure, there is some pretty egregious advertising for Pepsi. It has the most bizarre use of pizza that I've ever seen, and Bridget Nelson admittedly looks fantastic. But beyond that, I mean, it's a bit of a mess, isn't it, Cobra? It's a bit of a mess. Even when I grew up, I always thought this to Stallone was what Raw Deal was to Schwarzenegger.
Okay.
Just, although admittedly with a much cooler character. But yeah, rewatching this film, I thought I was going to go back to this kind of really schlocky, ridiculous 80s throwback. And it is that to a certain extent, but I'm just not convinced it's fun enough to kind of really get over the bar.
I mean, this is kind of like the same feeling I had. I enjoyed it as a kid. I was looking forward to rewatching it. I remember it being great. I remember the car being great, the gun scene. I love a kit-up scene. We've said this many times. Commandos, kit-up scene, things like that. So when he's making his special gun with the biggest laser sight I've ever seen, I remember all that, and
yeah,
it's fantastic. Well, as a kid, it was fantastic. Rewatching it now, again, I'm not sure if it's a good movie, dude.
I don't think it is. The thing is, like I said, when I was younger, I didn't like it, particularly when I was younger. I watched it once, and it was the same with my brother. We watched all the Stallone films, all the Schwarzenegger films, and this very much fell into the same category as Raw Deal, where I think even at a young age, we're like, this doesn't feel like a great movie. But the one thing I thought going back to it is like, well, it'll be violent at least. That's what it's famous for.
Yeah.
So I was quite surprised that despite the fact that he kills 41 people in this film, which
out
is
of
only
52.
Out of 52, so he has a good batting average. And, you know, that's only like 30 down on like First Blood Part 2, which same director and only a couple of years earlier. But this film received huge cutting, but maybe that's the reason it's 87 minutes long, to basically take out a lot of the violence. So it wasn't what would have been back in the 80s called X-rated. And like, you know, that was always the concern. If it's X-rated, you know, it's going to have an impact on box office. And they were really looking for this to be another big hit. It wasn't just an ultra-violent film. They're like, you know, obviously this is coming off the back of Rocky. He's got Rambo. And I think the idea for Stallone is that this was going to be his third pillar. He was going to have the sports movie. He was going to be the soldier. And this was going to be his cop. You know, I don't think when he made this film, he's like, I'm just making Cobra. I'm making Cobra a character. And this is going to be this ongoing thing. So obviously they've cut a lot of the violence down. And if anything, I was surprised how far it's gone back the other way, because sure, you get like a shootout in a convenience store at the end, and there's a lot of dudes with axes and stuff, but there's no blood in this film.
No,
like there's loads of hinted at violence, but you actually see so little in this film.
I mean, I always say this, we always say we'll get to it, and when I re-edit, we never actually get to it. But we
okay, get to it now then. Get to it now.
No, we'll get to it in a minute, because I want to talk about the fact that the guys, Night Slash and all that had no plot for what they were doing. But
zero plot.
We'll get to that in a minute. You said about the violence. The violence starts off straight away, even before the convenience store. That fucking narration, that intro is cheery, isn't it?
Oh, I mean,
there's a burglary every 11 seconds, an armed robbery every 65 seconds, a violent crime every 25 seconds, a murder every 24 minutes, and 250 rapes a day. Like, fuck, all right, that happens in America. How about you going to, like, are you going to then go, oh, but I'm trying to cure this? No, you just want to tell America.
Just state in the facts.
America is fucked. That's basically what you're saying.
It's weird because never has a movie stated its intentions faster than Cobra. Because like you said, there's nothing else. It goes straight into this like really depressing voiceover. And then you go, like, the opening of the film is, like, really egregious, some of the directorial stylings. Like, the red lighting, the use of the camera, I couldn't remember any of that. And the reason is because it's abandoned. There's one or two death sequences where, obviously, they found it tricky to cut out the violence. So they've turned it, it's become almost artistic, where the camera shifts and the lighting changes. Those sequences are fucking horrible. But they go heavy with this opening sequence where they're trying to tell you this dude on a bike is a bad guy. So all the lighting's red. You know, it's so clearly this guy's going to do something wrong. But just in case you don't know, he pulls up into a disabled parking bay. It's like, this is his big dick move. It's like, dude, I think the fact that he goes into a fucking shopping mall or whatever it is, a convenience store, and shoots like 3 people is probably enough. But they're like, no, just in case you don't get it, he also parks and disabled it.
Again, there was no explanation of why he did that.
which is fine if it's just at the start, but there is no explanation. And we will have to get to that now. Let's just deal with it now.
Okay.
The fact that I don't know if they're a cult. I assume they're a cult because they all stand around and they hit their axes together, which is fucking mental. That's the closest they come to explaining. It's like, yeah, they just stand around. There's like a dude in a suit. So, of course, the cult kind of...
Yes, you saw that random dude in the suit then.
How could you not see the random guy in the suit?
You've got all these guys. Like you say, it's a cult, so they're all from all walks of life. So this guy comes from his 9-to-5 office job, picks up his two-headed axe and his other axe and starts banging them together for no reason. There's no like, we're going to change the world. We're gonna own the night. We're going to do any of this. And also, the cops and the news report said, right, in a month, he's killed the night slasher, because they think it's one guy, has killed 15 people.
Yeah.
In a month. And the cops, every time you look at the streets, if that was anywhere else, they would be out in force, the cops.
Well, yeah, the whole relationship between the cops and what are they called, the zombie squad? Again, a lot of this we'll get to that in a minute. But I mean, to bring it back, like very briefly to the cult, like even Brian Johnson, who plays he's literally just known in the film as the Night Slasher, he doesn't have a name. He even said on set, he was like, he went to Stallone. He's like, dude, like, what's the deal with my character? He's like, what is his motivation? Can you just tell me anything about this character? He's like, he's just evil. He's just evil. And it's like, that's all he gave him. That's all he gave. And you can see it. There's the bit when, and fair play to Brian Johnson, he is ripped.
Yeah.
That bit with the cop when she's like, oh, I don't know, she's in love with him again for whatever reason. But the problem is you go all the way through this film and they just don't have any motivation other than to just kill. And if it was just one psycho, and there are moments in this movie when it almost does feel like a horror film, especially the sequence in the hospital when he dyes his hair black so he doesn't get noticed. It's like, dude, you got the most distinctive face of all fucking time. Right? Nobody in the world looks like Brian Johnson. It's unbelievable. He's like, oh no, it's fine. I've dyed my hair black. But that part of the film kind of feels like a horror film. And you're like, okay, he's just evil. But there's like fucking 20 of, or God knows how many in this cult. And why is the dude in the suit there? Like, nobody knows. There's no explanation. And it means all the way through the film. And when they do have their big final fight, there's just no impact to it. Because you're like, why would anyone care? There's no relationship between them. And it's a glaring omission in this film.
This is episode 102, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So... We haven't done it on every episode, but every now and then, for some unknown reason, Cobra gets mentioned.
Because the poster.
Every time Cobra gets mentioned, I always turn around and I mention pizza.
Well, you have to. I mean, you mentioned it at the end of the last episode.
Yeah, can we talk?
I couldn't remember. I was like, "What the fuck is he on about?" It's like, how? Honestly, I walked away from that because we finished the episode and we just did our usual thing. We went our separate ways. And I was like, what's he talking about? The pizza thing? I was like, it can't be that weird. It can't be like how weird. After I watched this film, I talked to my wife and I said, I think I can make an argument for pizza being the easiest thing to eat in the world. There is no other option. Like, you don't even need a plate. You just pick it up. It's already sliced. It's ready to go.
Yeah.
How the fuck this happens in this film, how they made that choice, and like, yeah, we're gonna fucking go with this, is ludicrous.
I don't think anyone made that choice except Stallone on set, because there's been rumors that Stallone, you mentioned director twice, that Stallone actually directed this film, and George P. Cosmatos is just the producer, on-set director. But
yeah, he's got a history with this, because we did George P. Cosmatos for Tombstone a couple of weeks ago, and supposedly Kurt Russell directed that. So I'm not sure if George P. Cosmatos has ever directed a film.
No,
but yes,
he's basically just a yes guy, I think.
I think he is, yeah.
But, so Stallone gets there, and one thing I've never noticed, I've mentioned this pizza scene so many times because it's weird, the fact he takes a slice of pizza, cuts it in half, with a fucking pair of shears that are just left.
Doesn't even cut it in half. He just cuts the end off.
Yeah, he snips the tip, okay?
Yeah, he snips the tip.
But he takes that and his gun cleaning kit out of the fucking freezer.
Why is his gun cleaning kit in an egg tray?
In a freezer. That gun oil is going to be frozen. And he decides to eat that little bit of pizza with his gloves on. Yeah. Nobody's ever eaten pizza with gloves on, like, in the house. You know, and sorry, Karen. Sorry. Do you know what this is? This is a Liam special, this is. You've said this quite a few times on these episodes. This is cocaine.
Oh, it's 100% cocaine. This has got cocaine written all over it. Yeah. He might as well have had like just a little dab on the end of his nose. This decision was 100% aided by the use of cocaine. And it's everything about it. Like the pizza alone is mental enough. And if you haven't seen this film for ages, please, even if you don't rewatch the entire film, just type in Stallone Pizza Cobra. It is an absolute treat. So he's sitting there.
There's websites about it. There's Reddit threads about it. Apparently.
Of course there is. Well, because there's no excuse for it. And so he takes out the freezer. So that's your first step. It's mental. It's like, well, what the fuck are they both doing in there? Why is his gun cleaning kit in an egg tray? We don't know. Then he eats the pizza with his gloves on. Mental. Then he snips the end off the pizza with a pair of scissors and eats that. Insane. Then you look about the living room and you realize what an absolutely bonkers fucking living room situation he's got. Like, he doesn't have like a sofa or anything. He has like a swivel chair. He has the TV in the middle of the room. Everything about that scene in a movie which is consistently mental, and this film is mental, that is the most insane thing you'll see in this film is Cobra eating pizza in his living room. Like, there's just no two ways about it.
That and a trained police officer. No way around it. Apparently, he is a trained police officer.
Oh, 100%.
Keeps his firearm next to his dick.
Like, pointing at his dick.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, and it's a big... And that gun is big. Obviously, the big thing is, like, they want to show off the handle because, unsurprisingly, it has a Cobra on it. This film is not a subtle film. But every time he puts it into his waistband, I start thinking of the movie Rust with Alec Baldwin now. I'm like, dude, man, you could have just blown your dick off. And it wouldn't just be his dick, it'd be the whole thing. Like, that gun is huge. The whole... Like, it would clean the house.
And not just that. He does it after he fires the gun, where the chamber is going to be hot.
Oh, yeah. He's asking for a
lot. So he's cauterizing his Jap's eye shut, basically.
He basically is. And the thing is, this is all, again, cocaine and Stallone. Because for those who don't know, this screenplay for this was originally conceived from the ideas he had during pre-production for Beverly Hills Cop. Like, famously,
insane.
Yeah, he was supposed to be in Beverly Hills Cop, but of course, he didn't want to do the comedy take on it. Like, you know, in fairness, I think the original Beverly Hills Cop was somewhere in the middle of where it ended up. And Stallone wanted to push it into a much more violent, much more action-heavy, and he wanted to add a huge amount of budget because he wanted all the action sequences. And obviously, they were like, listen, we can't do that, so they went with Eddie Murphy, and then they went, if anything, the other way to turn it more into a comedy. It makes sense. But he basically took that idea and applied it to a novel, Fair Game by is it Paul Gosling or Paula Gosling? I can't remember. Paula Gosling. And I'm just starting to think that's a bad novel now because, you know, this film's only loosely based on it. But I think it was in 1995. They actually they had another crack at Fair Game with William Baldwin and Cindy Crawford. And the only reason I know that movie is because Cindy Crawford was in it, and she was like my first crush when I was growing up. But even then, this is very loosely based on like Fair Game and Beverly Hills Cop, but it's basically just Stallone on cocaine going, yo, we need more like explosions and action and axes, you know? So that's why you end up with this, let's be clear, a bit of a mess of a film. And my biggest, I think, regret of it is that we didn't get to see the X-rated version because I think, you know, if this film is, I don't know, 2 hours long, explains the zombie fucking squad, explains the relationship with the cops, and obviously spends a bit more time with the night slashers and the cults, adds the violence, this is probably a lot more fun. But instead, it just doesn't quite go far enough in any direction. And after an hour and a half, I was like, I'm not sure what happened in that film. I know there was a night thing and they had a fight at the end, but nothing in this movie has any impact. The relationship with him and Bridget Nielsen, despite the fact that I'm not sure if they were engaged or married at that point, there's no chemistry at all. Unsurprisingly, they were divorced 2 years later. Like, this movie just kind of happens and then it ends and you're like, I'm not sure if that's good or bad. I mean, I mentioned just before we started recording, I still don't know how I feel about this film. I know it's not great, but is it bad? I don't know. It just existed. It just happened.
It's funny about you said like the chemistry with Bridget Nielsen, right? I'm going to go into a little bit of a fact here.
Mm-hmm.
At one point during filming, Sylvester Stallone complained to cinematographer Rick Waite that they were falling behind and said he and his crew needed to work harder. Waite fantastically responded to Stallone saying, if you keep your hands off Bridget Nielsen's ass and stop showing off to your bodyguards, maybe they wouldn't have a problem with time. Stallone was shocked that somebody would talk to him that way, but he toned down his ego for a few weeks. In an interview, Waite also said that Stallone had a great sense of humor despite his huge ego. He also confirmed the rumor that Stallone was the true director of the film, calling credited director George P. Cosmatos a good producer but a bad director. So it's funny you keep saying about, you didn't keep saying, you said it once, about the chemistry, and all he's doing is squeezing her ass the entire time.
Yeah, and the thing is, Bridget Nielsen, like, when I think of Bridget Nielsen, I always think of her as being this, like, larger-than-life, not just because she's tall, but, you know, this 80s thing with the flat top, and I think of Rocky, but in this, like, she looks great, and I actually think she's okay. Like, and her whole career is quite weird, because obviously everything is tied up with Stallone. Like, she had like a really interesting start to her career. She did like Red Sonja in 85, Rocky 4, 85, Cobra in 86, and Beverly Hills Cop 2 in 87. Beverly Hills Cop 2 feels like almost like a fuck you to Sylvester Stallone when you look back, I suppose. But it's like she kind of drifted away then. But this is the movie where, despite the bizarro musical interlude in which she's dancing with robots, which is we'll get to that in score and soundtrack. But at the start of that, you think, oh, well, there's going to be a montage. Fair enough. All these films have montages. But at the start, they just aggressively keep cutting to robots. And there's no explanation as to why you're seeing robots. Like, what the fuck am I seeing robots for? What the hell's this got to do with the scene? And then you realize Bridget Nielsen's character is a model. And of course, there's no other reference to her being a model. She's just in a model so they can say, oh, look how hot she is for like 5 minutes while we have this, you know, musical interlude. But that whole sequence is bizarre. But other than that sequence, when obviously they do up with the hair and she looks very 80s supermodel, for the rest of it, she almost looks like just a really attractive human being. And I'm not used to seeing her like this. And I actually think, despite the lack of chemistry with Stallone, she's pretty good for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, in a film where everybody's going over the top, she is doing really well, because you've got Stallone trying to act the hardest he can act. Like that whole bad for your health thing with that Mexican gang who he moves with his car. Fantastic car, by the way. You've got the other copper then, who's like, you're such a bad copper, Stallone. Why the fuck does that have to be in every film, by the way? You've always got this over-the-top copper who's like, you're such a bad copper. Oh, you're terrible. I'm not going to listen to you because you're a bad copper. But it turns out, no, you're a bad. Fucking every film is with that.
Well, it's sorry, carry on. I don't know.
You've got the random partner who, why? Like, dude, I don't even know that.
This was my point.
That he is
Gonzalez.
Gonzalez, okay. So you got all of these terrible, over the top or doing nothing. And then you've got Bridget Nielsen who's thinking, you know what, I'm going to try and act the shit out of this. And she does really well. When she needs to act scared, she acts scared.
Yeah.
I think she found a tough mind trying to act like she needed Stallone. Like she needed somebody, a savior.
Yeah.
Because look at Bridget Nielsen. I don't think that girl needs a savior.
Well, the thing is, she actually goes, rather than being like the savior complex, she does obviously have that as part of the role, the whole, you know, I need saving stuff. But a big part of her remit, I think, is her basically falling in love with Stallone. And that kind of leads to its own problems. So there's a few things to deal with here. The first, and I have to mention it, is I completely agree with both the Gonzalez and Detective Monte. I'm like, are they needed in this film at all? Like, we've referenced a couple of times the whole zombie squad thing. Is the zombie squad just those two? There's a whole bunch of really half-baked ideas in here. And one of them is the zombie squad. Like, what, there's just two of them? Gonzalez just looks like a regular-ass cop. There's no suggestion like he's anything, like a super badass like Cobra. So it's like, why can't it just be Cobra rather than the zombie squad? Okay, that's kind of swept under the rug, despite the fact that Gonzalez doesn't need to be there.
Can I interject there before you move on to the next one? Because you said the zombie squad, right? But you're right. Why is it the zombie squad and not just Cobra? Because at the very beginning, the convenience store, supermarket, whatever you want to call it, they don't say call the zombie squad. They say call the Cobra.
Yeah.
So Cobra comes along with Gonzalez. Cobra goes in, Gonzalez stays outside. So again, he is absolutely pointless. He is a yes man.
Sadly. Yeah, he just kind of exists, and all I can assume is they want some dialogue moments. But it's the same problem with Detective Monte. Like, you don't need the chief of police who was
LaFleur.
LaFleur, yeah. Which is, I just remember he's always the baseball guy to me. He's in every baseball. Yeah, he does play Babe Ruth. But if there's a baseball film from the 80s, chances are Art LaFleur's in it. But excuse me, Andrew Robinson as Detective Monte. You don't need both of them, but supposedly the original idea for the script was that Monte was going to be the main villain. Like, it was going to be like revealed that he was like the mastermind behind the Night Slashers. And again, that makes more sense. It makes sense he's in there. And again, you'd be adding a bit of narrative to the Night Slashers and the whole fucking cult, and then just adding a bit of agency because there's already that relationship between Cobra and Monte. So, but of course you remove that. So instead he's just been, like you said, like 15 people have been killed, and all Monte's interested in is fucking giving shit to Cobra. It's like, and it's almost disappointing in the 80s that it's not a black chief of police. Like, let's be clear, they did it so much better in fucking Beverly Hills Cop, the quintessential angry black chief. Yeah. But yeah, it just speaks to the idea that there's all these kind of like half-baked ideas. And I think I mentioned earlier about the fact that there's like hints of it being a horror film. And I actually think one of the best sequences, and maybe hinting towards the film I would have preferred it to be, was the one with Bridget Nielsen where the Night Slasher, Brian Thompson, goes to the hospital and he's literally dressed like fucking Michael Myers. Yeah. And he's chasing her down. And I'm like, that seems super tense. You're building up that character as something to fear rather than just vague, oh, there's a cult going on. And then, they have that kind of showdown where, well, Stallone's never been the most convincing runner. He's no Tom Cruise, that's for sure. But that whole sequence feels more personal and less vague. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of like this film. I wouldn't mind a kind of violent, dark horror action film. But it quickly kind of dissipates. Although that scene in itself is quite insane because the bit when she escapes from, like, I don't know, the double-doored I don't know what it is, closet that she's stuck in. She runs out into the corridor and she shouts, "Is anyone there?" And there's nobody there. And then she hits like an alarm and suddenly there's like 1,000 people. It's like, where were they all fucking hiding?
They're all waiting for, they're like, oh, we don't go out unless there's an alarm. If somebody's screaming, is anybody there? We don't do nothing. But if somebody hits an alarm, we move.
Yeah.
I felt for Brian Thompson at the beginning of the film, mind. Obviously, they've given this guy no motivation. They've given him no plot. But they also gave him tights on his face, which smushed the fuck out of his face.
And he already has an interesting face.
Yes. Yeah. Do you think, right? Because you said Brian Thompson went to Stallone and said, what's my motivation? Why am I doing this? And you did a very good Stallone impression that I'm not going to copy, which I think is the only reason you wanted to do Cobra, is to bring out your Stallone impression.
It's worth giving it a go, I suppose.
But at the premiere, Brian Thompson wasn't invited. And to this day, he doesn't know why. He had to buy his own ticket. I think Stallone's like, how dare you question me on my own movie? I'm blacklisting you.
Maybe, or he's just doing too much cocaine. He's just too self-involved at that point. You mentioned this was like the height of the diva era for 80s action stars. And he, famously with this film, they were, I'm not sure if it's true, but the staff were told not to look directly at Stallone. I'm not sure if that's true. That sounds ridiculous. But obviously, based on his shenanigans on set, his ego had gone absolutely through the roof. And I think the fact that this is like the start of his competition with Schwarzenegger. But even before that, I know Schwarzenegger had been around for a year or two, but at this point in 86, he's still king of the castle. Like, he's coming off Rocky IV and First Blood Part 2 back to back in 85. And those movies were fucking massive. They were two of the biggest films of the year. So he's like, listen, I've won Oscars for Rocky. I've suddenly become this like box office behemoth, and it's all just gone to his head, sadly. And it shows in this film. Like, he's had too much control. There's too many, I'm not sure if there's too many cooks in the kitchen, or he's just kind of like, there was already a template and he's got too involved later in the day. But it just makes for a messy film. And I know you mentioned the fact that you liked the car. It was actually his car.
Yeah, it was.
This is the kind of film it was. The 1950 Mercury. He's like, oh, I'm just going to have my car in this film. I'm not convinced that's a great car. And again, no explanation. All I can think of, the closest thing to it is something like Mike Lowry in Bad Boys having a Ferrari, I suppose.
Yeah, just because. But I like
just because.
I like that shape. I've always liked that kind of shaped car. It looks mean. I'm a huge fan.
It does look mean. But the problem with that, the real problem, is that, like the action sequences, the chase sequences are poorly cut together. It's a poorly directed movie above all else. And you see it in that right from the opening sequence in the shopping, I keep saying the shopping mall, the grocery store. It's like the guy's a terrible shot. He's got a shotgun, and I'm not sure, again, if they're trying to avoid too much violence, but it's like he doesn't hit shit. He's got a shotguns have massive spreads. He just points in it, just vaguely point in a direction. You should kill like 3 people. He doesn't hit anyone.
He was using that shotgun like it was a sniper rifle, because he let that guy run away what felt like 20 minutes before he shot him in the back.
Yeah. Like, it's
by the time that guy, because he was using a scattergun basically, so by the time that guy made the distance he did, he would still get shot, I believe. But I don't know if it would have killed him because he was quite a fair way away. I thought
he was rolling the dice. Maybe he survived that, but like it's shot poorly. Obviously this is the mid '80s, the era of the one-liners. None of them really work. It's like the one there was like, I don't shop here. It's like that doesn't work. And the weirdest one, I'm not sure if I love it or hate it, where he's in with like the I don't know, the police guys, whatever you want to call them. He's like, hey Cabretti, do you know you have an attitude problem? There's like a really long pause, like, yeah, but it's just a little one. And I'm just like,
yeah,
is that supposed to be funny? I mean, it kind of is, but I don't
like
think
his other line as well, where she finds out his name's Marion, and he said, oh, what did he say? I always wanted a tougher one. Like, was it Jane or something? And he's trying to make a little joke, and it just didn't come across as that. And
yeah, that's a nod to what's his name? John Wayne, isn't it? John Wayne's real name is Marion. So yeah.
And the other line, I don't deal with psychos, I put them away. Like, what the fuck? Like, I don't understand what's going on with you, mate.
Well, that's the thing with one of the big issues with Cobra is in this film, they can't decide if he's fun or stoic. It's like supposedly the idea for the character, he's based on Bruce Springsteen if he had a gun. So it's like if you gave Bruce Springsteen a gun in 1986, this is what Bruce Springsteen would like. And obviously there's the John Wayne stuff. It's supposed to be like a bit of a cowboy in modern day, inverted commas, modern day, obviously. But they never seem to quite decide. Is he these kind of like, you know, like really kind of, like you said, the opening sequence when he's like delivering like really gritty voice, like everybody's dead and everybody's getting raped. And then the next thing you know, he's doing these quite fun one-liners. I'm like, I don't know what kind of character he's supposed to be. And it's a shame because fundamentally, the character is so cool. And like, if nothing else, and this film has loads of problems and it's not great, but it deserved a sequel. It deserved an opportunity because I like Cobra looks so cool. I'm not sure if Stallone's ever looked better. Like the sunglasses, the match, it's vaguely ludicrous, but like the black top, the jeans,
there's got to be a joke about him chewing on wood all day, mind.
Maybe there is, but I tell you what, man. In 1986, Stallone is pulling this off.
He's still trying to make a sequel to this day, and I think the latest was like 2017. And I don't know if I want to see 80-year-old Stallone back as Cobra now.
No, they're not going to do that. They'll go with someone else. And I think he's trying to pass it on to Robert Rodriguez to direct. Kind of like he did with, what was the other TV show he took to TV? TV. No, the movie he took to TV. I do apologize.
Oh, from That's Still Dawn.
That's Still Dawn, yeah. Which I haven't seen, but I've heard it's held in pretty relatively high regard.
Season 1 and 2 definitely. Season 3 a little bit to be desired, but yeah, it's not bad. It's decent enough.
Well, but I know you could potentially bring it back now, but the fact of the matter is, it's like the framework is there for like a really interesting 80s franchise, and this one doesn't quite work. But despite the fact that this has got this like cult movie status, this was a big hit. This was a really big hit. This made like 160 million. Doesn't sound massive in 2023. 160 million in 1986 is a huge hit, and of course, it always gets compared to Top Gun because that was released around, I think it was a week earlier, and that made like 350 million. But this was still considered a pretty major hit.
Yeah.
And despite the fact that the film isn't great, and you've got this amazing character, like this iconic car, you've got, the zombie squad you could have worked on, all these other things. And because of the whole Bridget Nielsen thing, and they end up having a divorce and it was very messy, he just didn't want to go back to the character. And he said that's one of his biggest regrets, that he didn't go back. And it's like, it's one of those films where like, you could have so easily, like, if you had a Paul Verhoeven or James Cameron directing the sequel, and there's, previous with James Cameron, I know he didn't directly work with Stallone, but he did write the script for First Blood Part 2. And if you had one of those, like, top-tier directors making a Cobra movie, fuck, man.
We're talking 80s Cameron, yeah? Because I don't want to see fucking Cameron now put Cobra in water for some unknown reason.
No, we are talking Terminator, we're talking The Abyss, shit like that. Yeah.
I want to mention two things, right? You said about it being a big hit. When I was doing some research about this film is known in two camps. Mm-hmm. It's either Cobra, people know Cobra, or it's the film where Stallone eats a pizza weird. And I'm not making that up. That's how people know this film, right?
Excuse me. Which is, once you've seen the pizza eating scene, I totally understand. Because even if you haven't seen the film, if you saw the clip online, you would, like, you don't forget it. Like, if you knew nothing about Cobra and someone just sent you a link and you're like, wait, that, because you obviously know Sylvester Stallone, you would forever remember the pizza. So I totally understand that.
And the other thing I wanted, you mentioned lines. And the one line that made me realize, oh yeah, this is an 80s movie. This is a chauvinist movie. This is like Harvey Weinstein era movie.
I know exactly where you're going here.
Her manager.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. If you want a reminder of what the 80s were actually like, just watch that scene where it's casually thrown in like, this is what happens to hot women.
When he says, I'd be sick to not want to sleep with you. Oh my God, dude.
And he's like, oh, I'm doing this for you. I'm trying to put my dick inside you for you to help you with your career. Yeah. And the way she reacts, it's just like, oh, well, of course he would try this. And she's like, oh, I don't want to sleep with you. He's like, no, you should. That whole sequence is gross. And I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that they're making, like, so when he dies, it's almost like, oh, that's fine, because he's such a slime ball. But the fact that it's played so casually is just this reminder of what it was like for attractive women in the 80s in Hollywood. Yeah. It's fucking gross, man. Absolutely gross.
Like, I wonder, because his death was meant to be a bit worse in the X-rated version. Like,
100%.
Where he does like a Three Stooges slip on the blood whilst he's trying to get away. And
well, that's again, it comes back to that issue. I know it sounds like, oh, Liam has bloodlust kind of thing, but because they've obviously done it in post, everything feels clumsy and none of the deaths have any impact. And the fact of the matter is, this film should be a grittier, darker film. Like, you see that opening sequence, you're like, oh, here we go. It's going to be Stallone just fucking tearing up. Yes, he kills 41 people. I was amazed when I heard that. It's like, it doesn't feel like he kills 41 people at all. If you had asked me, like, before I saw the numbers, like, oh, how many people does Cobra kill in this people? I'd be like, I don't know, like 9? Like, legitimately, I'd be like 9, 10, fucking 41. Like, don't get me wrong, in First Blood Part 2, when you find out he killed 71 people, I was like, yeah, well, he's there with a machine gun, just shooting down Viet Cong all over the place.
In Rambo 4, Rambo 4, where he's in Burma.
Oh, yeah, in Burma, yeah.
He kills Burma.
Oh, and dude, like, he kills the fuck out of... But don't get me wrong, I don't know, actually, maybe this film could do with the Rambo 4 treatment, because I remember watching Rambo 4, and obviously all the films are, violent to one extent or another. As we mentioned when we did the podcast, the first film actually only has one death in it. But 2 and 3, they're obviously building up more and more violent. Rambo 4 is one of the most violent action films you will ever see. He kills the fuck out of Burma. He rips a dude's throat out. That bit when the guy gets like the wrong side of, there's like a machine gun on the back of a truck, one of those massive ones that have to be mounted. He shoots a guy at point blank range. He just straight up fucking explodes. He explodes.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced we need maybe that level of violence, but maybe inching towards that. I don't think that'd be too bad. Sorry, I want it to be gross as fuck.
No,
the fact of the matter is, this film needs to be 20 minutes longer. It needs to be more violence. There needs to be loads more motivation. There needs to be a better script. Yeah, there needs to be a lot of changes, basically.
I wanted to mention the random second in command of the night slashers, like the Popper woman. Like, that whole... You see her first with her, like, massive hair, and she's helping him do a couple of murders. And then you go, get the license plate. And then you see her with her hair tied back, and she's actually a copper. Mm-hmm. And she's part then of she manages, no explanation, but she manages to get herself into the escorting duties for taking her out of town. Okay, whatever. I knew her name as Nancy. I just, like, before we started recording, her second name, Nancy Stork. Like, if that's not on the fucking nose.
It is a bit, and like the whole sequence, like, you're trying to sell us on the idea that obviously he's like this super cop basically, and she is so unsubtle when she's escorting that she's giving up the ghost and she's feeding information, and Stone just keeps what are you doing at the phone? And it's just like, and I thought, oh, well, he's onto her, but then he's still acts surprised later. I'm like, dude, you're a bad cop. You're a bad fucking cop. And she's the worst. How the hell she's got this far and not been caught is absolutely beyond me.
Mentioning the car again, the random Fast and Furious NOS thing that they have in that car.
I think this was like one of the first films that used it, though. Because at first, when I saw it, I was like, what the fuck does he keep doing? It looks like he's pushing it into gear. It's like, that's clearly an automatic. And then I realized, no, he's like basically pressing the NOS button.
Yeah.
So, he was, if nothing else, this film's like, 15 years ahead of the game.
Honestly, Like it's got some great ideas, but it falls flat a lot.
Well, that's the point, though, isn't it? It's like there are some legitimately great ideas, and that's what makes it, instead of just being a bad movie, it's a disappointing movie, because you've got, like, Stallone has got this character, and if you took the right director, and obviously they could, like I said, this movie made money. There was no excuse not to make a sequel with a better director. Get fucking, Stallone off the coke, get George P. Cosmatos out of there completely, get a decent 80s, and I don't even think you need, like I mentioned Verhoeven and Cameron, that's like fucking wishful thinking. You can get a decent action director from the 80s. I think there's a potentially great follow-up to this film. And it's a shame that it doesn't exist, because this film is constantly hinting at the better film it could have been. But fundamentally, it never happened, sadly.
You said...
So we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves in terms of like reviews and recommendations. I think you can see where this is going, but it can't be helped. It's the nature of the beast.
You said that this was based on Paula Gosling's Fair Game, which they made in 1995.
Yeah.
With Cindy Crawford and William Baldwin, was it?
One of the lesser Baldwins, yes.
Yeah. Is that any good?
No. I saw it because Cindy Crawford took her top off. And I mean, like I said, she was legitimately, like, the first poster I had when I was younger was a Cindy Crawford poster, which I look back at almost with a bit of pride. I'm like, I feel like that's quite a classy choice for a 12-year-old boy. But besides the point, that, like, she's not a great actress. There was a reason she didn't go on to do much else. The film wasn't fantastic. It wasn't well received.
Is that why you think that the novel is probably just a bad novel?
Well, I mean, I don't want to blame the novel. I've not read it, but obviously it hasn't done well. They've given it two goes in terms of moving it to the screen, but could you even call Cobra an adaptation? It sounds like they've taken the basic guideline, but it's been mixed in with the whole...
just wanted to base it on something to make it sound a bit better. Oh, we've based this on a novel. Like, he probably found it off the street and just like, we'll do it.
It could have been. I mean, nobody remembers it for the plot. I mean, let's be clear. The best thing about this film, by a country mile, is the poster.
Is the license plate of his car?
Oh, dude, awesome 50. God, I can't believe I almost didn't mention that. It's just because the car was made in 1950 and the 50s were awesome.
Awesome, right.
It's an absolutely insane license plate. But the reality is, the coolest thing, by a country mile, you only have to ask Rosewood in Beverly Hills Cop 2, another nod to this film, because he has the poster on the wall. This is legitimately one of the coolest posters of the 80s. And a big part of that, to bring it back to what I said a moment ago, is that Stallone looks fucking cool as shit as Cobra. Like, they don't quite get the character right, but if nothing else, when he shows up with the match, the sunglasses, like you said, the gun is such a unique gun, because he spends ages putting together. It's actually quite a small gun, but then it has the fucking laser on it, and you're like, dude, that's pretty badass. Combine that with like the hand cannon pointing at his dick with a Cobra on it. Yeah, it's awesome.
When I was a kid, watching the poster, like staring.
Just watching the poster. I've been watching this poster for 30 minutes.
Looking at the poster before I watched the film, I could have sworn that was a flamethrower. So a little bit disappointed that he didn't have a flamethrower on his gun.
I guess so. But that is the thing. I would make the argument that the poster is so cool that it would make you want to watch the film. Like, if I knew nothing about the film and I saw that poster, I'm like, dude, I'm going to see that fucking film. I was like, Stallone is... his name's Cobra Cabretti. Get the fuck out of here. That sounds amazing. And you go and see the film and like, why isn't it amazing?
Marion Cabretti. It's the best name ever.
Marion Cabretti is a pretty cool name, let alone Cobra Cabretti.
Yeah. A lot of films do that, though, don't they, with the posters? Like, because you mentioned already Raw Deal. I like the poster of Raw Deal, where you just got...
it's pretty coul.
Schwarzenegger just there, he's got the
with
gun.
The vest.
The vest, and he's looking a bit disheveled. You think, this is going to be a great film. You watch it, and it's shit.
Don't make no mistake. This is a better movie than Raw Deal. Raw Deal, nobody wants a sequel to Raw Deal. Nobody wants to see Arnold Schwarzenegger as... I can't remember the name's character. I'm just going to call him Raw Deal. Nobody wants anything to do with that film. This film is quite bad, but it's almost good. It's almost good.
To the point where we have covered a lot of film. We have covered a lot of shite on this.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But we're not going to do Raw Deal, I don't think.
No way. No, I mean, how many podcasts would we need to do before we land on Raw Deal? It would be a fuck... Like, we've gone too far. Like, we have legit... That is the bottom of the barrel, Raw Deal.
If we do Raw Deal, that's going to have to be our last episode ever.
Oh no, dude, you can't sign off with raw deal. That's like a fuck you to our own podcast. I can't be doing that. But anyway, I think we've covered the film enough. I think you get the gist. In terms of,
sorry, before we do that, we actually haven't mentioned the final scene. Not the final.
Oh yeah, Jesus Christ, the whole pig thing. Like he really spits out the word pig a lot.
Yeah, like we haven't mentioned any of that. The reason that they just go on this, which is funny, right? Because they end up on this small town, and they do kill. So 52 people die. He kills 41 of them, which must mean he's killing at least 40 to 41 of actual cult members.
Yeah.
But when you look at whenever they're doing their axe smashing thing together, there's only about 7 of them. So where the others come from, I don't know. So are the other 9 or 10 people that die, or 11 people that die, are they part of that small town?
I assume so.
I mean, you've got that poor woman at the beginning. Like they kill.
No. So you got the 41 people that Cobra kills, and then the other ones are all just the people that you see get killed by the cultists. Like they kill quite a few.
11 people. Like the cultist doesn't kill 11 people before they get to the small town, do they?
Maybe not. They probably kill like 4 or 5, perhaps.
Yeah.
So that's like a 5. Yeah. I'll do that.
Random. So they kill it. Like that small town is very small. Because it seems to be all they've got is that, and then some random warehouse where Stallone can just go in and just take out loads of people.
Yeah, and the problem is with that warehouse, because of all like the flame and stuff, it kind of immediately encourages comparison to like Terminator 2, which is just a much, much better film, obviously. But my biggest issue, and I think I mentioned earlier, is the fact that you get this, it's all building towards this showdown with the Night Slasher. And all of a sudden, you've got the Night Slasher, and he's all that pig chat, and he's like, suddenly he wants his eyes. He wants Cobra's eyes. And I'm like, why do you want his eyes so much? Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, it's like the scene falls flat because there's no relationship between them. They've hardly seen each other. You're like, why does he want to kill Cobra so bad? There's, if something had happened, he'd been looking at the screen, even like the Joker in 89 Batman. It's like, when he's seeing Batman getting all the kind of credit for his shenanigans, even something as low key as that, just anything to build up a relationship between the Night Slasher and Cobra. But instead, they show up, they're facing off. I'm like, why should I care? Admittedly, though, the actual death of the Night Slasher is pretty fucking badass. It's pretty brutal. When he ends up on like the fucking spike and then gets dragged into the flame. Again, we mentioned it a few times. There's hints throughout this film of this being almost like a horror action film, and it's usually when Bryan Johnson's on screen. Like they're really going for it, and obviously he's got that unique look. And the way he dies is like from a different movie.
I love his knife.
Obviously you don't see like blood, but him getting like hung up on like a fucking spike and then dragged slowly through flame. That's fucking grim, dude.
I love his knife as well.
Oh, it's nice, badass, with like the spikes on the handles. It's so 80s, man.
It is. It's not something you would carry around as a daily carry, is it?
Well, no, you're going to get a reputation. Like, if does anyone have a knife? And even if you've got it in like the kitchen drawer, you pull that out, you're like, wow, dude, that's a fucking pretty serious knife, man.
Before we move on to favorite scenes, I want to play the game that you like to play every now and then, the Known For game on IMDb. We're going to do Sylvester Stallone. What do you think? He's got 4, as they do. What do you think his 4 known fors are?
Oh, I bet you it's like Demolition Man. Is that one of them?
Nope.
Oh, it's got to be one of the Rambos, right? Rambo 3. Nope. What the okay, Rocky 4.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fuck. I'm struggling. It's not Cobra, is it?
Nope.
Demolition Man, Cobra. The Assassin?
Nope.
Assassins, sorry. I'm striking out all over the place here now. I've got 1.
Yeah. Do you want me to?
Yeah, go for it, man. Put me out of my misery.
Rocky 4, Rocky 3, and Creed.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I thought, well, if I'm going to give you 1 Rocky, that would be enough. Jesus, yeah, it seems a bit harsh to give him 4 Rockies and then... Admittedly, for Creed, he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, which he should have won. I stand by that.
But this dude has done so many films. He's got so many iconic characters. Yeah. Basically, he's known for playing Rocky. And don't, fair play to, I think we mentioned it a few weeks ago, Rocky has maybe the greatest hit rate of any movie saga of all time. It's in the conversation. You're talking, how many films is it now? 6, 7, 8, 9 films in the Rocky series. And you're talking 1 miss. 1 fucking miss. Other than Rocky 5, every film is at least decent. The second worst movie in that whole saga is Rocky 2. Rocky 2's okay. It's not amazing, but it's fine. Rocky 2 is basically Rocky 1, but he wins.
Yeah, it's Rocky 1, but not as good. It's basically like Terminator 3 to Terminator 2. But, excuse me, but it's actually better than Terminator 3. But yeah, Rocky's got this. But to take your point, dude, you've got to get a Rambo film in there. Like, he's been in so many massive films.
What
about Daylight? What about Cliffhanger? And Cliffhanger is one we'll do on the podcast.
Oh my God, sure. Cliffhanger.
And we really should do Demolition Man.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we're gonna get a couple of guests for Demolition Man because we've got a couple of friends who want to.
Yeah. So, well, yeah. I've got a long-standing argument with one of my friends as to what's better, Demolition Man or True Lies. And I've got a funny feeling I know exactly what bullshit side you're going to take, but we'll deal with that when we get to it.
Yeah. Right. A favorite scene?
Favorite scene. What do I have down? Yeah, you've already, in America, there's a burglary every 11 seconds, all that nonsense. That, and I don't know, now you go all the way through that, and then suddenly there's axes. I'm like, oh, dude, I'm fucking totally into this film. It never lives up to its intro, but that's probably my favorite sequence.
Okay. Mine is, because I keep mentioning it all the time, is the pizza scene.
It is, you are right. It is the pizza scene. It's both the best and the worst scene, yes. 100%. I've got that, because if we're going to go into loves and hates,
okay,
I've got it under hate, but I could very easily move it into love. Yeah. Because, it depends what kind of, like, of course, he's eating like a lunatic, but at the same time, it's spectacular. Sorry, one sec. Oh my God. Sorry, a bit of a cough.
Should we go into loves?
Yeah, before I choke to death. One, Cobra's look. I've mentioned it a couple of times. Yes. Like, if nothing else, he's totally badass in this. Two, Bridget Nielsen looking more like an actual human rather than 80s caricature. I actually think she's really good in this. And three, axes.
Right.
Excuse me, Jesus.
My third love, but I'll make it my first. I'll go straight back off yours. I'm not even going to mention axes. I will mention weapons. The axes, the knives, the guns. Like, they are iconic. They look great.
Yeah, no, you are right. You are right.
Lead you into what you think is going to be such a fantastic.
Well, in fairness, like, I'm going to say, when I say the Cobra look, that does incorporate both guns. So the handgun, the cool Uzi with the laser, they're all incorporated. There's a major part of the Cobra look. But and that's the thing. Like, it has so many cool visual cues in this film. It just doesn't come together into a film.
My second one, the Cobra character. Like, it's great. Unfortunately, Cobra doesn't belong in this film. I don't think a film about him, but the Cobra character, if he had a better story around, if he had like you said, you keep saying a better director, anything, I think this character could have become iconic for the right reasons, not for the wrong reasons, because he's iconic for a different reason.
Oh, yeah. It's a shame that, a character that looks as cool as this, and you're talking Stallone at the peak of his powers, and let's be clear, the most iconic thing he does in this film is eat a pizza. Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit
I'm gonna put them together, Bridget Nielsen and Brian Thompson. Because they are acting the best they can act for a George P. Stallone film. Because, because again, they're doing what they get. Like Bridget Nielsen, I've already said, is a complete change from Red Sonja from Rocky 4. She's doing really well in it, and she looks fantastic. She looks great. Brian Thompson, the other way around, he looks fantastic for being so intimidating. That dude
he's got such a unique look, and he looks pure evil. Like, he does a lot with what he's given in this film, in fairness. Like, you buy into the idea that he is a complete psycho. And if nothing else, when Stallone said to me, it's like, oh, you're just evil. It's like, he does look evil. Yeah. Like, the fucking 100-yard stare, like, everything about him, I'm like, okay, I buy the idea that this guy is a psycho.
And that's going to jump straight into my hates. I'll jump into them. Because I hate the fact that the Night Slasher, the cult or anything has no story, has no motivation, has nothing to say why they are doing what they are doing. Like, and I know people just can be evil, but when you have a film, you kind of need to be led down the path of why they are doing this.
100%. Especially, like, you could arguably do it if you were going for the Mike Myers style. The Night Slasher's working on his own, and he's just pure evil. You could maybe get away with it, but when you've got a cult, you need more. You can't just be, there is a cult. That is all that was written on the page. There's a cult. They have axes. Go. You can't do that.
My second hate is then Detective Monte, Andrew Robertson, because in this version that we watched, he is just an absolute shitebag. He's a prick. There's no need for him. It might have led a bit more into love, or at least not being in my hate, if it turned out he was the actual true leader of the cult.
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah, not a huge fan of him. And the whole story, the whole choppiness, like, no explanation of what the zombie squad are, no explanation of like Stallone's motivation, why he does what he does, anything like that. It's just, it's a terrible script.
It really is. It really is. And like they've tried to, supposedly they were keen to get it down to 87 minutes or under 90 minutes to get it into more screens to compete with Top Gun.
To make more money.
Yeah. So there is a fabled 2-hour cut, which is found on, used to get like comic conventions back in the day. There'd be like a VHS section where it'd be like these unreleased versions of films. And supposedly there was one of those for Cobra, and it was the 2-hour X-rated cut of this film. I'm like, I would, like, despite all my criticism of this film, if you said, dude, we found it, there's a tidied up 2-hour cut of this film where the motivations have been ironed out and the violence has been added back in, I'm like, I want to watch it. I 100% want to watch that film.
I wonder if that's on the Magic TV, because I ended up watching the weird work print cut of Nightbreed, didn't I?
Yeah, but I think that was released onto a DVD. This has never been officially released. This is one of those weird fake VHSs kind of and I'm not even sure as to the veracity of these claims, but supposedly there is a cut out there, the 2-hour original cut, where there is more story and there is a lot more violence. And like I said, I would love to see that, albeit a tidied up version, but as to whether I will, I suspect not.
No. Your hate?
I mean, they're very similar to yours, just worded slightly differently. The fact that nothing ever feels significant, and that comes to your point about the fact that we don't really know enough about Cobra, we don't know enough about the zombie squad, the cult just kind of exists. So things happen in this film. And as I said, it's like 87 minutes long. It all kind of zips along in a pleasant enough way. Like, it's not like you said, it's not terrible, it's not a horrible watch, but you just don't give a fuck about anything. It just kind of ends. They can't decide who Cobra is. As I said, is he stoic? Is he funny? I don't know. No backstory. But the lack of a backstory, I can almost deal with. You kind of play up to that in subsequent sequels if those were to have happened. But the fact that it's like, is he a total badass or is he a one-line machine? I don't know. And the fact that the lack of blood and the poorly shot action sequences, those are the really unforgivable ones, because, this is an 80s action film. We, especially when we were younger, we were willing to forgive a hell of a lot if the action sequences were badass. But in this film, they all just fall a little bit flat. And I think that really is the film's greatest sin, truth be told.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any There are quite a few facts to this film, so do your usual, pick a handful of the best. We've already covered a few as well.
Should we do the one you forgot? No, you said you were going to call it every year. Alternate titles first?
Oh, Jesus Christ. There can't be. It has to just be Cobra, right?
There's 4 alternate titles.
Okay, cool.
Or should we say extensions of the Cobra title?
Yeah, that was all. It was going to be like Cobra - violence or some shit. I don't know.
So Argentina, Cobra, the strong arm of the law.
Okay, fair enough.
Austria, Die City Cobra.
Oh, no, I don't.
Die City / Cobra.
This isn't like a German thing, is it? Like, oh, no, not Die Bart Die. That's German for the Bart D. So it's
what, the City Cobra then?
Yeah.
I don't know it.
Who knows?
Brazil, Stallone Cobra.
Wait. The film is called Stallone Cobra.
Yeah.
You can't name the film after its star. I think you totally underplayed how fucking mental that is. The film is called Stallone Cobra.
Yeah.
That is fucking real.
We have to preface it that the translation probably...
Well, you can't... No, there's no excuse. There's no translation for Stallone. It's either his fucking name or it's not there. That is... All right, okay, that is insane. But I will... For those who, and let's be clear, most people listening to this fucking podcast will be aware of 80s movie posters. But back in the 80s in particular, the name of the stars was much more prevalent than the name of the film. If you Raw Deal's a perfect example. I'm not sure if you remember the poster, but in the background, it was just Schwarzenegger's name repeated all the way down the poster with just Raw Deal down the bottom. Even Total Recall, a really good fucking film, at the top, huge red letters, Schwarzenegger, and it was the same with Stallone. But to have the gall to put it actually as part of the title, Stallone Cobra, is fucking unbelievable. So bravo, Brazil. Bravo.
I love how you've latched onto that one, because the next one is my favorite.
Okay, go for it.
From Finland. Now, this is the video box title, right? So there may be an explanation. Maybe this is a double feature, but I don't know. Tango and Cash and Cobra.
I mean, it has to be, right? It just has to be. They can't just go throwing them together.
But the fact that it's Tango and Cash and Cobra.
I mean, that is a pretty good double bill. That really is. Like, Tango and Cash is another film which isn't quite as awesome as it should be, and another one we really should do on this podcast. But yeah, in terms of like, if you want a double bill for Cobra, I actually think Tango and Cash might be the perfect movie.
Yeah,
I really do. Another flawed Stallone, like a movie where they were clearly trying to turn it into a franchise. And like I said, fucking, what was it? Like 91 when that was released? 9-year-old me, you're telling me that Kurt Russell and fucking Stallone are in an action movie together? Dude, I'm fucking at the cinema. But it's just never quite as good as it should have been. But another film where you're like, would you have wanted to see a sequel to Tango and Cash?
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
Tango and Cash, mind, fits our pre-mid because this is an 80s film. It's 1989.
Oh, it's 89, is it? Yeah. My apologies.
Get it right. Jesus.
I know, right? Fits our remit. Dude, we've done films from we did like the Justice League with Jack Snyder. Who the fuck's Jack Snyder? Zack Snyder, I do apologize.
Our original remit. Before we decided to change it up, yeah.
Before we decided we just didn't give a fuck anymore. We're just going to cover movies we wanted to do.
Yeah. So we've already covered the work print. We've already covered Paul Brian Thompson had to buy his own ticket. The car was Stallone's. I think we've done a few of these. The knife used by the Night Slasher character was made for the film by knife designer Herman Schneider. Stallone had asked Schneider to create a knife that audiences would never forget. Well, he did it.
And isn't there like a famous thing with the knife where they created two versions? So there's the normal knife, and there was a giant version of the knife. It was like 3 foot long, but it was 4 close-ups. So like the knife looked more prevalent, and it was just to kind of get that, like, because they were like, for certain shots, the knife just didn't look big enough. And of course, when he's holding it out, it's supposed to look aggressive and scary. So there's like a giant version of the knife, which is like 3 times bigger. That might be quite fun.
Stallone said he got the idea for the LAPD zombie squad from a real-life zombie squad in Belgium, comprised of cops who go out at night and handle crazed criminals on their own terms. So he said that in his interview, but he couldn't actually put that in the film.
Yeah. They kind of vaguely hinted it a couple of times, but it never comes through properly in the film.
Brian Thompson and Sylvester Stallone had not spoken to each other in over 20 years after the film was made, until they recently met at a horse riding academy where Thompson's daughter was giving Stallone's daughter riding lessons. Why is that in fact?
I mean, yeah, that's a pretty interesting one. But, fair enough. I would have loved to have heard the conversation, but hey-ho.
Director Nicholas Winding Refn is a huge fan of Cobra. In Refn's cult movie Drive, the main character has a toothpick in his mouth in some scenes. This is Refn's homage to the opening scene of Cobra, where Cabretti has a matchstick in his mouth.
Yeah, I mean, I can get that.
Of films, mind.
But that's the thing, though. Like, I'm sure he's not like the film's a mess, but you could totally be a fan, and I'm a fan of the iconography that it creates. Like, when I think of Stallone, it's like this is one of his most. And like I said, it did pretty well at the box office, but you can see that this could have so easily become one of his most iconic roles. Like the template is there, so I can understand why people would want to take elements of this film, because elements of this film are really good. They just don't stick the landing. It's the problem with this film is it's so much less than the sum of its parts. That's when films are at their most annoying. Like all the ingredients are there to build a delicious cake, and you end up with a bit of a turd, if truth be told. And that's when it's the most disappointing.
I may be touching on your soundtrack.
That's okay.
The Stan Bush song, The Touch, from the Transformers, the movie, was originally written for this film.
Yeah, it's such a shame it's not. Well, no, I'm actually glad it was in Transformers, because it's fucking awesome in Transformers.
Right, one more.
This film could have done with it, though, because we will get to it in score and soundtrack. The songs in this film aren't great. They're just not great at all. And you just think, man, if you had you've got the touch in this film, you're getting a memorable sequence. Maybe the fucking robots would have made more sense. Who knows? But never mind.
Stallone's obsessed with robots. He put it in Rocky 4 as well. He's just got an obsession.
He did, yeah. Maybe it was just a thing. Yeah. Like, there's no reason for that fucking robot to be in Rocky 4, and there's definitely no reason for robots to be in that musical number in this film. But I keep calling it a musical number. The musical montage. I do apologize.
I'm going to give. Well, yeah, you've already said about nobody was allowed to talk to Sylvester Stallone during filming. Right, one more, and this is perfect for what we were saying about the fact that Stallone had an ego. For the night slasher monologue in the final confrontation with Cobra, the whole pig scene. Mm-hmm. Brian Thompson actually had to do the scene with the script girl because Stallone was off watching a basketball game on television.
It's bonkers, isn't it? He was just clearly doing what the fuck he wanted. Although, and I did that as the opening quote to the film, the whole "this is where the law stops and I start," which makes sense. But to throw in the sucker bit at the end, what the fuck was that about? That didn't feel natural coming out of Stallone at all. Who's he calling a sucker? I don't know.
Oh, one more. In the original script, Night Slasher was called Abaddon.
Abaddon?
Abaddon is a demon, but...
Okay.
Abaddon.
Yeah. Well, the fact that I didn't know Abaddon was a demon maybe is why they've gone for the Night Slasher. Like so much of this film, a little bit on the nose. Maybe they've gone too far the other way. But the fact that he's called the Night Slasher is the last of this movie's problems.
Yeah. Right. Let's move on.
Legacy, it's a lot of stuff we've already mentioned. The fact that this really is considered a cult movie, despite the fact that it was a pretty big hit. But I think obviously it did 160 million, but because it's not a great film, I think otherwise it would have been forgotten. But because of the pizza scene, because of the iconic look, that's what's made it live longer in the memory, because of the fucking awesome poster. So I can understand why it's become a cult movie 30 years later, despite the fact that I just think like it would have been one of those films, I did decent business now and everyone forgot about it. But then 30 years later, people are finding out about the pizza. Unbelievable. Again, I mentioned earlier, the franchise that didn't work for Sly, there should have been his third pillar. There should have been 4, 5, 6 fucking Cobra films, which we never got, which was a bit of a shame. I was going to say, is this the coolest cinema name ever? Is it beyond parody? But then when you tell me about Brazil calling this film Stallone Cobra, fucking maybe it is. But Cobra Cabretti, that's a pretty cool name. Oh, fuck. The character's so cool. Why isn't this film better? Yeah. Again, famous for Sly being at his most insane. Fame's clearly gone to his head. And the fact that Stallone wants a TV show with Robert Rodriguez in line to direct. That's not the first example. They have been trying to make follow-ups to this film for a long time. Obviously, I don't think we're going to have Stallone as Cobra Cabretti when he's 77. But, if you get the right guy in the role, there's the potential for it. I'm not sure if I want to see it now. I think as much as I said I wanted to see a follow-up to Cobra, I wanted to see a follow-up to Cobra with Stallone made in the 80s. Cobra 2 needed to come out in 1988. I'm not sure if I give a fuck about a Cobra TV show made by Robert Rodriguez in 2023, if truth be told.
It's a shame, isn't it? It's the whole length of time thing for a lot of these, because Cobra, again, because of the length of time and everything now, it's something I'll probably watch, but I'm not sure I need. Mm-hmm. There's the Escape from LA or New York remake, whatever they're doing now. There's The Crow as well that's been dragging on for years.
I just don't need these films.
That's what I mean.
Even 10 years ago, if you were like 2010, you were doing Cobra 2 starring Stallone as like an older Cobra. Yeah. I'm like, I could go for that. But it's like that ship has it, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, he was making like, the last of the Rocky films. He was still doing the Rambo films. There was an opportunity there in, say, like I said, somewhere between 2007, 2000 to 2012, where you still could have made a follow-up to this when Stallone suddenly, got back into, because people forget, Stallone really dropped off a cliff for like 10 years. Where he wasn't in big films, but then of all the movies, it was Rocky 6 or Rocky Balboa brought him back, and then that double thing with Rambo, and suddenly he's back in the public consciousness, and then he makes the Expendables. If Cobra 2 was coming out at the same time as the Expendables, it might have worked. But yeah, he's too old now. It's got to be someone else, and I just don't really give a fuck enough about it to see Cobra without Stallone. So it is what it is. In terms of score soundtrack, you already mentioned the Stan Bush thing. The weirdest musical montage ever, the whole robots thing. Angel of the City by Robert Tepper. It's an okay-ish 80s song as far as montages go, but it's so oddly cut together. That final ominous shot of robots, I keep coming back to robots, but you should go back and watch it. It's really bizarre. I don't know what that's supposed to represent, and I don't think it's really supposed to represent anything. I think you're right. I think Stallone just liked robots in the mid-80s. The other almost musical montage, Feel the Heat by Jean Beauvoir. It's also super weird. It's like it wants to be a musical montage, but just turns into a dramatically scored conversation. it just, none of the stuff, it's just more examples of things not quite working. The songs aren't quite as good as you want them to be. The montages aren't as fun as you want them to be. So yeah. Like much of the rest of the film, the score and the soundtrack, it's almost there, but it just doesn't quite work. In terms of a video game, this should be a perfect. Sorry, Karen.
I just wanted to mention the music. Do you know that?
Go for it.
Did you mention the final song?
No, I totally forgot about that.
So the final song, and them riding off on the bike and going up the mountain, randomly made me think of The Wraith.
Oh, bizarrely, that made me think of the end of, this is a deep cut, Street Fighter 2, the animated movie, the Japanese anime one from the early 90s, which, by the way, is fucking dope. Really, really good, Street Fighter 2, the movie. And at the end, you see Ryu, he's, instead of on a bike, he's walking up over hills, and they look exactly the same. And then you see a truck in the background, and you realize Bison's driving it, and he goes and kicks him, and then the credits end. That seems fucking awesome. So, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, but no, it's the Wraith, because they're both on a bike, they're going up.
No, just be clear, you are correct.
Yeah. But it was random that even the music sounded the same.
Yeah. No, it is quite similar now that you mention it. But again,
Wraith stole it from Cobra.
Yeah, when was the Wraith released? 87 was the year after?
87, 88, yeah.
Yeah. So it would have been hot off the heels. Who the fuck's copying the end credits to Cobra? Jesus Christ. Video games. There was a.
Oh, no, the Wraith was 86. They're both the same year.
Oh, same year. So it's just one of those. It's not quite the same as Armageddon and Deep Impact. They just happen to have the same end credits, but
random entrant.
It is again something that like kind of died to death in 80s cinema. Like the film kind of still half playing is the credits roll, and then having like a freeze frame or a fade away. You don't get that so much now. Of course, the big thing is obviously you have like the spoilers or that what are they called? Post credit sequences, whatever. These are just the film continuing while the credits roll. Are we good? Video games?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No problem. It was developed by Ocean Software. I'm not sure if, again, we've mentioned it a few times. I always remember seeing them in W.H. Smith's huge PC boxes. And, none of these were made for consoles. They were made for computers in Europe. So it was released for the Amstrad, the Commodore 64, the ZX Spectrum. I never had the pleasure of playing it myself, but the reviews were like middling. But it depended on what version you play, because a big difference for games back in the 80s is that you'd have different developers based on what console you're making for.
Yeah.
So you could have like a game based on a movie, and it would go across everything, especially in Europe. So you'd have like the NES. This doesn't have the NES or the Master System, but usually you'd have NES, Master System, maybe even the Mega Drive, but then you'd have the Spectrum, the Amiga, the Commodore 64. And quite often you'd have like 3 different developers all making pretty different games. But this is just one relatively consistent, walk and shoot games, nothing much to do with the film.
I had it for the Amstrad.
Oh, was it any good?
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I had random that and Terminator versus RoboCop.
I remember that one. Yeah, I remember that. Again, not a great game, but I loved it just because it was Terminator versus RoboCop.
And I was a huge fan of this because, again, I liked Cobra as a kid, so I was playing Cobra.
Yeah.
I don't remember much about it, but I do remember enjoying it. But once again, playing a game as a kid, I don't remember getting past the first level.
Yeah, that was often the case, wasn't it? But you've got to remember, like, how cool this would have looked in the store. Like, those boxes, especially for, like, the Amiga versions, were massive. And it would just be basically the poster for the game. So you'd have the big red box, you'd have Stallone looking like a badass. You're like, fuck, I've got to get this game. And then you get it home. And more often than not, it was like, oh, it was bang average. And it's like, fuck, that cost me like 30 quid. That's my birthday money done on a shit Cobra game. Yeah. It's surprising to hear that there haven't been one since, but that's the world we live in. If you're going to make one today, I would actually go for Yakuza Studio or Ryoga Gotoku Studio, working with Sega. So they make all the, unsurprisingly, the Yakuza games. But instead of obviously having Kamurocho, which is like a realistic recreation of Tokyo's Kabukicho district, it's like their red light district, basically. I would just take like a corner of LA, have them recreate that in huge detail, and just put Cobra there. So nothing to do with the film. Basically, like that is how you make a follow-up to Cobra, because you could bring Stallone back to do the voice, fully voiced, loads of story, loads of side missions, but just in a corner of like a highly detailed corner of LA, set in the 80s. Like Yakuza 0 was set in the 80s in Japan, and I think it was Tokyo and Osaka. And, you obviously, computer modulation, you just young up his voice a little bit, because, I mean, Jesus Christ, he sounds like gravel now. And he sounded like gravel in 86, but he certainly does now. But you could have fun with the character because, I'm not sure if you played the Yakuza games, but there's obviously, you walk around the street, you get into fights and stuff like that. That's part of it. But then you can also go to like karaoke bars and stuff like that. And, I feel like there's enough to work with the character where you could lean into the more absurd side of it.
Yeah.
So I would love to have like a Stallone fully voiced Yakuza studio take on Cobra. I think that would be absolutely amazing. So fuck the TV show, fuck a sequel, get Stallone back and make a video game.
No, I'd probably go with your one, but I would have gone as a first-person shooter.
Yeah, that's fair enough. The thing is, I think I want to see Stallone, though.
I guess we're saying, but if you just want him to voice it, first-person shooter, I think would have been better. Mm-hmm. Just because, basically, it is, again, just Cobra killing everybody. Which is
I think the reason I went with that one.
Oh no, I agree with you.
Obviously, it crossed my mind with the first person shooter.
Your one definitely, but to be a little bit different, I'd go down that.
Oh no, I totally get that. I think, and don't get me wrong, that is absolute pie in the sky. But basically, I'm like, I want to see a follow up to Cobra, but I want it with Stallone, and this is the only way you could do it is if you made a video game. And I'm like, the Yakuza games are already fantastic, and I'm like, you could really have some fun with the character with like the. Oh God, hiccup! Silly one-liners. Really embrace that world. You could really lean into the whole zombie squad thing.
Yeah,
and as I say, it's very much wish fulfillment. But I guess that's what this section really is, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with you. I think I'll go with your shout.
All right, cool. So yeah, that's the film. I think you know where this is going. Recommend? No, I can't recommend this to anyone. It's not good enough. Sadly, you've either seen it or you haven't. In terms of going back to this in 2023, you can do it. If you haven't seen this film since like 1980s and you're into Stallone films, there's stuff you can take from this film. And as I said, it's 87 minutes long. It clips along. It's not a terrible film. It's just a disappointing one, but it's still 2 stars.
Yeah. So what are we doing next week?
The same thing.
Basically, yeah. It is. It's not something you would recommend, and it was 2 stars. It needs a lot to be a 3.
It does. And you should just do what Rob did. Just watch the poster. Just watch the poster for 30 minutes. You get so much more fun out of this. The poster's amazing. Even though I don't like this film, I would happily have a framed poster of Cobra on my wall because the poster is that fucking cool and what it represents. But as I said, that just makes it all the more disappointing that this film isn't as awesome as it should have been. So yeah, 2 stars. Can't recommend, sadly.
No, but it was still fun to go back. It
was.
It was fun to go back and watch, and yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was one of those weird films where it's a bad film, but I still enjoyed watching it. I was glad I went back. Yeah. So I don't know. Like I said, I say can't recommend, but what we're usually talking with recommend is just your average Joe. If I'm just you haven't seen Cobra, you should watch Cobra. It's like the only people who should be watching Cobra are people who know fucking Cobra. But Rob, anyway, what are we doing next week, sir? Hopefully a better film than this.
Well, I hope it's a better film than this.
Excuse me. Oh.
We're staying in the same year, mate. We're staying in 1986. We're going to stay in 1986, but I think we're going to go down a different route. Mm-hmm. We're going to go down the route of hearing about babes and cod pieces.
What the fuck? I have no idea what you're talking about.
Have you heard about the babe?
The babe with the power. Of course. Jesus Christ. Yeah. How could I not get that? I'm sorry. I'm too busy choking to death. Of course you're talking about Labyrinth.
Labyrinth, mate. Labyrinth. I mean, we've said it quite a lot lately. It's a shame that we haven't already done Labyrinth.
Well, it is almost amazing that this is the 102nd episode and we just did Cobra and we haven't done Labyrinth because, I mean, I'm not sure if it's the same for you. This was a massive part of my childhood. Yeah. It's the kind of film everyone I knew watched. Everyone I knew. Like, I don't need to recommend this to anyone because everyone's seen it. Everyone's fucking seen this stuff.
Don't spoil next week's episode.
Well, no, I mean, come on, man. Like, no, I'm not saying whether I would recommend it because I haven't actually seen this for a couple of years now. I suspect I won't recommend it. But the point is, in terms of, like, if I went to my friend and said, oh, dude, you should watch Labyrinth. It's like, I don't need to tell them that. They've seen fucking Labyrinth. It's just one of those films it feels like everybody watched. But yeah, dude, it's a great choice. It's long overdue. And dare I say, I suspect it'll hold up slightly better than Cobra.
Well, you'd hope.
I certainly hope. Well, if nothing else, is the cod piece as weird as the pizza in this film? I don't know. It'll be interesting to go back.
I mean, there's some weirdness in this film.
Oh, yeah, there is some weird stuff. But it's in a fantasy land with Muppets and, with cod pieces, whereas the pizza scene, it doesn't belong in that. But if somebody ate pizza like that in Labyrinth, it wouldn't be as weird as Cobra Cabretti doing it in Cobra. That's for sure.
I love how you call him Cobra Cabretti. You can't just...
I don't know why I did that. Marion Cobra Cabretti. Stallone Marion Cobra Cabretti. So anyway, yes, thank you for joining us for Cobra. And please do join us for Labyrinth, one of the most iconic and most important movies of the 80s, which we're doing for episode 103, like fucking lunatics. Of course we're doing this. So thanks, Rob, for picking it, because I should have picked it fucking months ago. Yeah. So yes, thanks for listening. Do join us next week, and bye-bye, I guess. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys. See you next week.
Sucker.
Oh, and before we forget, here is Rob with all the finer details. Got to get through those, dude.
Yeah, so basically you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at HeyYouGuys80s. We're also on email at HeyYouGuys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any recommendations, any corrections or omissions we may have missed from any of the films that we've covered. Just get them in. And also, if you could, please leave us some 5-star reviews. That would really help us. And we'd like to thank, as always, Darry Fletcher at Darry Doodles for the fantastic artwork that we're now producing. Thanks for that, mate.
Cheers, Darry.
Yeah. And thanks again for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers. Bye.
Hey, you guys!